Sports Podcast.
And McAllister down the left field line. Connor Tate is going to round third. He will score. And rounding third is Blaylock. He will score. And the Dogs walk it off.
If you're looking for the latest Georgia Bulldog news in football, basketball, baseball, and recruiting, then you are in the right place.
It's third down. Bryce Young's career. You need 10. Play clock at 4. From the pocket. Launching downfield. Underthrown and intercepted. Keely Ringo has an escort down the sidelines. All the way to the end zone. And Georgia is going to conquer the Crimson Tide.
Hosted by Jeremiah Stoddard and Jonathan Williams.
Georgia on the mountaintop. Demons be gone, and the drought is over. National champions at long last.
Just sit back, relax, and prepare yourself for these hot takes you're about to listen to.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Classic City Sports. As always, Jeremiah Stoddard, along with Jonathan Williams. We got an exciting one for you guys today. A lot to cover. We got to cover a little bit from Mississippi State this past weekend, where Georgia absolutely throttled them by the end of that one. We've got Kentucky coming up this weekend, which we originally thought was going to be a really good game this year. Ends up being a little bit different, but we are going to still talk about Kentucky ahead of that game as well. Then we have a question about Stetson Bennett and his level at Georgia, what he is and where he's going to end up being when it's all said and done. So we're going to kind of talk about what he's done at your favorite school. And then we've got King of the Hill to wrap everything up as well. But Jonathan, let's go ahead and jump straight into it and not waste any time. Actually, if you guys are on here, if you can, go ahead and make sure you like the video as well. That will help us get more people in here. The more likes we get, the more the YouTube algorithm likes it. So we appreciate it if you go ahead and hit that button for us. But Jonathan, go ahead and kick us off here. Mississippi State, how'd you feel about it once it was all said? Let's talk about the first part. Let's break it into two halves. First half, okay. It ended up being a little bit closer at halftime than everybody expected, especially with that punt return for a touchdown at the end of it. So just kind of talk me through what you were thinking and feeling through that first half of the game first.
All right, I'll ramble on while you turn your light on.
Yeah, that's what I was going to do. Thank you for saying it. Go ahead, call me out.
First half, Georgia came out of the gates pretty strong. And honestly, up until the punt return for a touchdown, it looked like Georgia was just going to roll through that game. And then obviously they get the punt return for a touchdown, right before half. And I think that honestly, after that moment, I don't think you will ever see Kirby Smart try and put more points on the board when you have a lead about to go into halftime. They got the ball back with 52 seconds. And then you ended up giving them the ball back after going 3 and out. So that'll probably be the last time you see Kirby Smart and his offense do that. So then they cut it to 5 at that point because it's 17-12. They didn't get the 2-point conversion. So then one possession ball game, and now all of a sudden things are really interesting. But other than that, first half was pretty clean. Stetson threw that interception, I believe, in the first half, but honestly couldn't really blame him. He got hit right as he was throwing it, so it got underthrown a little bit. They were able to pick it off, but outside of the turnover, really Georgia held up really well. Defensively, they played really sound. We talked about it last week. Is that with Mississippi State, they're kind of a hard team to defend because it's all quick action. You're going to get the ball, snap it off, and they're just dumping it off, dinking and ducking. That's what they did the entire game. It was just quick slants over the middle, and it picks up 10 yards, and it's like they're moving the chains quickly, and you got to get them to third down and get them off the field when you do. And Georgia's able to do that in the first half. Defense held up really strong. They played really well. Offense came out electric. They came out shots firing, and they were putting points up on the board. So, outside of the punt return, obviously, it was a great first half for Georgia.
Absolutely it was. And, yes, Harrison, this is the Rose Bowl sweatshirt. You are correct. Good eye. But, yeah, no, speaking of that one possession, like Kirby talked about it in his postgame, because somebody asked him about, the possession there, and they wanted to be aggressive. They had time on the clock. They had the opportunity, hitting that screen to start the play. That was your chance to get something moving, and see what you can get. After that play, next one, you're trying to get something going still. The third down play was where it kind of came, and that's where it killed you, right? So they didn't have enough timeouts to really do much on their side, but you had a couple timeouts on your side if you were to be able to move the ball down the field. Yep. But what happened was on that third down play, Kirby said it in his postgame, was you had the option. I think it was originally called a run play. Mm-hmm. He had the option to check it. And I guess he liked what he saw and he checked it. The problem was it was then incomplete. And once you do that, the clock stops. They don't have to use timeout. Then you're set up. You have to punt. It's not a good spot for you at that point in time. So you gave them the ball back. Unfortunately, they were able to return that punt all the way. It kind of screwed you over as far as that possession goes. But in the first half, Georgia started the game out really strong. I believe that first drive was like 73 or 75-yard touchdown drive. Just absolutely marched down. Had a 3-and-out for Mississippi State on the other side. And all of a sudden, you think you're in a really, really – it couldn't have gone any better. The first two possessions of that football game, trading possessions for Georgia, could not have gone any better. And all of a sudden, some stuff came undone for Georgia a little bit with the interception and other little things not working for you. Mississippi State is a hard team to cover. They do that dink and dunk crap all the time. And they really – so you expect a team like that to move the ball on you some. Absolutely. You expect a team like that to score some points. That's why when they came to Athens in 2020, it was a shootout. And no, that wasn't quite the same defensive team that Georgia had last year, nor this year. But they were able to do that because it's really hard to stop. And Georgia kind of had a game plan of playing that soft shell zone defense to where it's like bend but don't break. Yep. Let's see if they can drive the ball 10 plays on you. Let's see if they can do that. And they weren't able to keep doing that throughout the entire game. Obviously, that's where it led to Georgia running up the score, taking over the game when it's all said and done. But yeah, the first half, it started out so well. And then it started to unravel at you by halftime. And Kirby went back in the locker room and was like, hey, man, we can't do this. I don't know what y'all think you're doing. I understand it's cold. I understand there's all these cowbells in here. Doesn't matter. We got to come out in the second half and we got to start firing on all cylinders. And that's what you started to see in the second half, where Georgia started to take back over that game.
Yeah, Harrison, we were just, or at least I was about to just get to it. Ladd McConkey was a big factor in the second half. He was a big factor in the first half. But last week we did tell you, I know connection was spotty last week, so I don't even know if you guys were able to hear it, but we did say expect Ladd McConkey to have a big weekend against Mississippi State because we talked about in 2020 when Jermaine Burton was here. He went off for 197 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he was in that same role that Ladd McConkey played on Saturday. And sure enough, Ladd McConkey had a fantastic game. I mean, the dude was just uncovered. He couldn't do anything wrong against Mississippi State.
143 yards?
I mean, first play of the second half, boom, came out of the gates, a 70-yard touchdown to the house. I mean, those are the kind of things that you expect to get from Brock Bowers, not Ladd McConkey. And yeah, we do have better Wi-Fi this week. Thankfully, we do. This time that we're not.
Listen,
we're not.
Speaking of last
week,
last week ended up being one of our better episodes as far as
over
views.
500 views,
550 views. We got more subscribers, everything. So if you're one of those subscribers from the last week, we hope this one is a lot smoother of an episode. We feel like last week's content was really good. Last week's content was good, but the connection, and I was not feeling well, so I sounded like crap and everything like that on top of it. So we appreciate everybody that stuck with us and how that one ended up being such a good episode. We appreciate it as well. We'll try to make this one the same kind of thing. But yes, in the same place, have good Wi-Fi this time. We're ready to roll. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just saw that comment and it made me laugh.
You're good. So
it's the beard.
Yeah, Ladd McConkey had a huge second half for Georgia. I mean, and honestly, that was a good position for Georgia to be in because, I mean, yeah, you had to come from behind victory against Missouri that you needed, so you had to come out in the second half strong and respond to that. And then you had kind of a close game with Kent State. But this was an instant where Georgia was on the road in a hostile environment against an SEC team where it's a one-possession game at halftime, something that Georgia has not had to experience a lot this season, really at all. And so then you got to see how your team responded. And how did they respond? They responded with a 70-yard touchdown first play. And immediately you extend your lead to 2 possessions. So that was huge for Georgia. Good to see that they could respond in that way. And then just the second half of general, Darnell Washington got his first touchdown on the season. Very much deserved for him. He's had a huge season, so he deserved to get in that touchdown column and join in on the party there. And then it was also great seeing Kendall Milton get back in action. He had that last run of the game.
Yeah, 34-yard touchdown
sealed
run.
It, 34-yard touchdown run. That was great for him. He's been dealing with injuries, kind of nicked up. And honestly, people have been saying – kind of throwing some shade towards his way with how well Dejon Edwards has been playing, Kenny McIntosh, of course, and even Branson Robinson and his moments. So now it was good to see Kendall Milton kind of come back in there and say, like, hey, man, don't forget about me. Like, you guys have kind of forgotten what I'm here and what I can do. So it's good to see him kind of reestablish himself and be like, you still got me as a weapon as well. So if he can get back fully healthy right before this playoff run and before the SEC championship, that'll be huge for Georgia.
Absolutely. And the last thing I'll kind of talk about before we transition to the next part of it. In this game, the one thing, the big concern that I had, well, 2 big concerns that I had was, one, you turn the ball over multiple times again, right? And I understand, like, honestly, the 2 interceptions, I don't really put those on I don't really put those on our boy, right? Like I don't put those on Stetson. Like
one
he
was
got
a
hit.
freak play.
He got hit. The second one was he threw it. Defensive lineman put his hand
Just
up.
made a freak play,
and
man.
he didn't just. Most of the time it hits it and it flies away, right? This one, it was a lot like you remember the interception against Alabama in 2020.
It literally
at the
fell
line of scrimmage where it fell straight into his lap. Did the same thing. He stopped it.
It fell in Cedric Van Pran's lap.
Yeah.
It was literally sitting on Cedric Van Pran's
Yeah.
arms, and the guy was just like, "Oh shit, there's the ball!" And then so again, like that's just a freak play. Really can't. Yeah, like you said, can't really pin that on Stetson. So neither one of the interceptions. But I'll tell you what is a little concerning. It's not just the turnovers. It's been ball security recently for Georgia. There was almost that near fumble that Dejon Edwards had where the ball got stripped out, but they called it dead because of forward progress. And honestly, I don't even know that it should have been ruled forward progress. Looking back at the replay,
they just said they blew the whistle, and it's like you can't review it.
You can't
it's
review
literally
that.
not a reviewable play.
But
so
it very easily could have gone the other way, and Mississippi State would have had the ball. So that's been kind of an alarming thing. You fumbled quite a bit against Tennessee, and now you're back in Mississippi State, and you almost have another fumble again.
So that was a big concern, right? Turning the ball over. We talked about this prior to the Tennessee game, and where I said that if you turn the ball over twice in a game, your team has allowed 20 points to those teams, right? Georgia allowed 2 turnovers again this time. 19 points were put up on the other side. The only exception to that at this point is Tennessee, actually, with 13 points in those games. But we traded turnovers in that game, which is the difference. The problem is Georgia's not getting turnovers to balance out when they turn the ball over. Like this one against Mississippi State, you didn't turn the ball over that way. But what you did is have about 3 or 4 fourth down conversions fail for them. That was your version of it, and that's what
might as well be a turnover.
That's what Kirby said in his post game was that was essentially what our turnovers were. We stopped them on fourth down. We got it back that way. So that's your big difference on it. When you can't take the ball out of the air or anything like that, you stop them on fourth down. It works out. So that was your big thing, right? The other thing that I had a problem with, which if you look straight at the box score, you aren't going to necessarily realize it. Georgia had 179 yards rushing in this game.
70 of them were.
70 of them were in the first play of the second half where Ladd took off, right? Mm-hmm. 34 more was Kendall Milton on that one breakout play at the very end of the game with 2 minutes left or whatever it was. So there's 134 of those 7. So you had, 35 yards if my math is right the rest of the way? That's not good.
No, it wasn't, especially not against.
It's not a good performance.
A run defense, I believe, ranked 77th in the nation coming into that game. So, but at the same time, you can make the argument as like, well, that's all it takes, though. That's all it takes is a 70-yard run from Ladd McConkey in your own game to put points on the board. Or all it takes is Kendall Milton breaking loose for a 34-yard touchdown. It's like, I agree. I actually talked about it in my post-game grade reports for the offenses. I talked about, like, the run game. What honestly wasn't there. It struggled pretty much all night. And so, but at the same time, you have to go both sides and say, like, well, heck, you broke 2 big plays. And so that also plays into the run game. Like, you hit on those, and those are very important to hit on if you can. So,
and because it's a comment in there, and Harrison's getting a little bit ahead of us on this with the Stetson Bennett talk. Yes, we know about that stat. That stat is in the conversation for today, and I don't know if you saw it, but it's up here.
I glanced over it,
right there. So I'm not going to put it on the screen because it's a long comment, but it would take up too much of the screen. You wouldn't be able to see our face, kind of thing, But anyways. Stetson Bennett, yes, is 999 yards behind the single-season record at UGA, and that is Aaron Murray in 2012, right? 2012?
Yep, 2012.
He is currently on pace to break that in 3.5 games based on his current season average of 289 yards per game. Yep. So, theoretically, he could have that beat after that would be in the first bowl game.
Yep.
Right? So, he's guaranteed 4 games right now because right now you got the SEC championship game and then you get a bowl game. Even if say they didn't make the playoffs, it's still a bowl game. You're going to get 4 more games. You might get 5 games. And so at that point, you have a pretty easy target for him to go over that number. Stetson Bennett is currently 33 yards over what he put up last year, right? Mm-hmm. He's already thrown more yards this year than he did last season. He's got 2 regular season games left to go, at least 2 postseason games to play, and possibly a 3rd.
Yeah, and the thing is, too, like he would do it in the same number of games more than likely that Aaron Murray did back
14.
in 2012. So it's not like Stetson's going to do it in like 3 more games than what Aaron Murray played in 2012. It's going to be the same number of games more than likely. But it does beg the question. Actually, Harrison, Stoddard and I actually collaborated on that stat.
We did.
It wasn't just me this time.
I actually sent him a text talking about what he had. I texted him and I said, fun fact, because I know he does all the stat stuff. I said, fun fact, that he's already got 33 more passing yards than he had last year. and he's averaging 289 a game. So we'll see what he's able to do the rest of the
there's
way.
a
And so
little
he did the
Classic
rest
City
of it.
collaboration on that one. How about that
Yes.
for an alliteration? Classic City collaboration
There you
for
go.
that one. So it was a joint effort on that one. But yeah, I did put it out on the timeline, got quite a bit of attention for good reason, because it's like Stetson Bennett so quickly, and this is where it's really going to transition into talking about, is he going to finish as the GOAT of Georgia football, at least for like his position. But so quickly, even like 8 months ago, everybody referenced Stetson Bennett as, okay, he's the great hallmark story about how he went from a walk-on, went to the JUCO, blah, blah, blah. We all know the story about Stetson Bennett, where he came from and whatnot. But now he's all of a sudden become a guy that's getting tossed around in the Heisman conversation. Now, whether or not he gets an invite, okay, whatever. But his name has been mentioned in it over the past couple of weeks. And now we're talking about he'd be the stat leader for passing yards in a single season, which includes the SEC all-time passing yards leader and what many consider as the greatest player to ever play quarterback at UGA. And so quickly he's went from this feel-good story, walk-on, whatever, to now like Stetson Bennett is that dude now. Like Stetson Bennett is no longer known as a guy that won a national championship in spite of his defense. He's becoming a guy that Georgia is winning ball games because of Stetson Bennett. Like Georgia's offense is successful because of what Stetson Bennett is doing. Now it's been that way. At least if you've listened to us, we've explained to you how Stetson Bennett has played that role for Georgia even last year. But now people are starting to take notice of what Stetson Bennett is doing.
And Zach, you make the comment in there about Stetson for Heisman, and the thing about that, I think he's not going to get a real look at it because of his touchdown numbers. But in reality, the thing that's deceiving, and I was looking at this today, he's got 14 touchdown passes. Last year, he threw for 29 touchdowns. He only had one rushing touchdown last year, though, so he ended up with 30 total touchdowns. The guy is currently 9 under that because he's got 7 rushing touchdowns this year. He's blown out his rushing touchdown total from last year by 6 already. So my thing is he's only, once again, 9 touchdowns away from what he put up last year. So he could still have a total of 30-plus touchdowns on the season. So no, he's not going to be like some of these guys that already have 35 touchdowns out there or 28 and stuff like that. Like, no, he's not going to be that guy. He doesn't have those stats. But he's still scoring a lot of touchdowns, along with, like we said, if he were to throw on this current rate, he's going to throw for 3,900, 3,800, or 3,900 yards, I believe, in the regular season, just about. Oh, no, I'm sorry, 3,400 yards in the regular season. So in the next 2 games, he'll be over 3,400 yards. And if he were to play through a national championship game, he would throw for 4,200 yards. So if he were to throw for 4,200 yards and then have a total combined about 30 touchdowns, to me, that would be worthy of a Heisman conversation. I'm not saying he should win it, because there is a guy in the Heisman talk right now that's actually not really getting enough attention, that actually he's in the ACC and that people are talking about him because of it. But he actually probably deserves it over anybody else that's in the conversation.
I think he should be the front runner.
He's already got 3,900 yards. What is it? Something like that. And 35 touchdowns?
Yeah, like 38 touchdowns. Like something ridiculous. He's put up ungodly numbers over there at North Carolina.
Yeah, and 70 yards or 70% completion
Drake
or something
May,
like that. Drake May is absolutely lighting it up right now. So I think he should be your winner as of right now, just because of what his production has been. It's been unreal. But I think Stetson's going to put himself where he should, in my opinion, get an invite to New York. I think he should get an invite to New York. I don't think he's going to be your Heisman winner. I don't think he should win it because of Drake May. I think he's going to be the one that should actually get it.
Let me provide some other context for you. Just recently, I believe this last weekend, Stetson Bennett passed Matthew Stafford on the passing touchdowns list, which I don't know where that places him. I want to say like 6th or 5th now on the list. But also, he's about to pass Stafford on the career passing yards list, which would put him at 5th. And he has the chance to potentially pass Jake Fromm on that list, which will put him 4th all time on Georgia's career passing yards list. 4th all time. So this is what we're talking about with the legacy that Stetson Bennett is leaving. And I know when we get into the discussion about, is Stetson Bennett going to finish as the GOAT as a Georgia quarterback? Is that the type of legacy he's going to leave around? I feel like people are just going to say, well, he has the luxury that a lot of people don't, of having this feel-good story behind it. And that's what draws people to him more. And that's what kind of adds to this glamorous feel about Stetson as to why he should be the GOAT and blah, blah, blah. Well, I also would say that guys like Aaron Murray, Matthew Stafford, Stetson Bennett did not have the luxury of playing his freshman year or even really getting any type of playing time his freshman year. Aaron Murray did. Matthew Stafford did. They were able to develop throughout their career. Stetson Bennett was a 3rd-string quarterback. He was an afterthought from the very beginning, once he got to Georgia, if you go back and listen to anything about coaches say, Kirby Smart told you himself, he's like, I didn't think the kid had a chance in hell at ever playing. Todd Monken himself admitted that one of the worst evaluations I've ever had in my career was deciding what Stetson Bennett was capable of. He said, that's one of the worst judgment calls I've ever made in my career as an offensive coordinator. That guy has been around for a very long time. And for him to say something like that and own that says a lot to me for him to go out there and put himself and just kind of take the bullets for that one. So, yeah, Aaron Murray doesn't have this feel-good story behind him. Matthew Stafford doesn't have a feel-good story. David Green, Eric Zaire, etc. But Stetson Bennett didn't have the luxury of getting to get in on practice with the ones, work with the twos up until a year ago where he was – I mean, for 2 years in a row, he was kind of just thrown into the starting spot because it was like, holy crap, what do we do? Let's see what Stetson Bennett could do. And it just ended up working out for him. And now he had this whole season where he worked with the ones all off season. And we said he's going to have a huge season this year. And I even put out a tweet in the offseason saying, like, guys, quarterbacks that stick around with Todd Monken for 3 years, their numbers tick up dramatically every single season. I compared Stetson Bennett to Nick Mullins over at Southern Miss when Todd Monken was there, and how I was like, look at Nick Mullins' numbers with Todd Monken for 3 years, and look at the trajectory that Stetson Bennett on as well. And I was like, he's going to have a big season, and yet here he is putting up huge numbers.
Stan, he did send both of those guys to the portal, and this past weekend, JT Daniels got benched.
Yeah, he did.
At West Virginia. So everybody that was so against Stetson keeping the job last year and then this year as well, even after winning a national championship, JT Daniels went somewhere else and he just lost his starting job. So that says something about one, JT Daniels, and I'm not hating on JT Daniels, but that should tell people that Stetson Bennett was the guy.
He was the right choice.
He was the right choice, because if JT Daniels goes to another school and then loses his starting job, Stetson was the right choice. At the end of the day, like, you can't make that argument anymore. But no, Stetson, to give yourself a little more credit, you didn't even say this before the season started. We had our prediction stuff, right? We talked about it. Brooks came on when we had Josh McAllister on here. My man here, his bold prediction for the season was that Stetson Bennett was going to make the single season all-time passing record.
I did
over Aaron Murray.
You know, I need to go back and pull up that clip.
Wait, hold it for a couple weeks.
Yeah, you're right.
Hold it for a couple weeks.
I'll be sitting on it, though.
Sit on that for a couple weeks. But my boy called that before the season started.
I did.
We talked about how he was going to have a good year, and I thought he was going to throw for more yards as well. I thought he would throw for more touchdowns, but the problem being Georgia's offense is when it would get into the red zone, they become run heavy because that's what the defense gives them, and it works. That our red zone success on the ground has been very, very high. Although the past couple of weeks, you've seen him get those touchdown passes. Like, he had this one last weekend against Mississippi State. They sold out on the run, and guess what? Darnell Washington somehow got lost sitting right in the back of the end zone, by himself.
Two plays. Darnell Washington was wide open, and then that one with Brock Bowers, he was wide open as well.
But how do you lose a guy that big in the back, like just standing by himself? And fun fact, while we're going over historical stuff, that was only the second career touchdown for Darnell Washington. First one since the SEC championship game last year. So pretty big touchdown for him. He's having a career year in receptions himself, and he's making himself a lot of money. Sorry, got off topic a little bit, but
you're good.
Felt like I needed to give a shout out to my boy.
And I'm pretty sure Brooks gave me a B+ rating on that take that I had. So you know what?
He did.
Here I am, Brooks. Look at me now. You know what? I'm going to have to rub his nose in that one a little bit.
He actually might have given you a B-.
Yeah, might even have given me a B-. So I'm going to have to say something to him about that when it happens. And then also, as the other doctor is pointing out in the comments right now, all without our number one wide receiver, A.D. Mitchell. Haven't had him since Oregon.
That's actually huge, man. I don't think people understand how big of a deal it is to not have A.D. Mitchell, because he's the only true X receiver on our roster. Mm-hmm. Like, we don't have a guy that plays the same role that he does. And luckily, Georgia has the tight end room and the running backs that can catch out of the backfield, and guys like Ladd that are making plays in other ways to kind of help alleviate that. But not having a true X receiver on the outside is actually insane that Georgia's able to do what they are on offense without that.
And so, and again, talking about that, big shout out to Marcus Rosemi-Jack saying that guy's not putting up like huge numbers. He's not popping out on the stat sheet or anything.
He's making big plays though. He's making big plays.
But when you need him to make a big play, when you need him to move the chains or something like that, he's always showing up and he's always making big plays. And he's played a huge role. You know, Kirby Smart talked about earlier in the offseason about how we don't know really what we have at wide receiver right now outside of Ladd McConkey and A.D. Mitchell. Like, we have no idea what those things look like. And so now you have your answer is Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint has stepped up in a big way for Georgia. And, yeah, he is a third down guy, Harrison. Like I said, he moves the chains for Georgia when you need him to. And he's been a reliable piece for Stetson Bennett to lean on in times where he needs to.
He has. And another guy that really stepped up for you this past weekend at the wide receiver position was Kearis Jackson. 2 incredible plays. Incredible. Like that catch that he had over the middle, he took a huge hit and still held on. Even Kirby talked about that one after the game. He actually talked about both of these plays after the game. And he goes, I expected him to drop that ball. Yeah. But the fact that he held on to it and took that hit that he did over the middle of the field, like he literally said, I expected to see the ball rolling. And then I was like, holy crap, he caught it, man. And then the circus catch that he caught, like twisting his whole body around, staying in bounds. It was another 30-yard play or something like that. Like it was beautiful to watch, man. Like seeing Kearis have plays like that, he's just quietly building up those. Like he's sure-handed when you go to him. He's very reliable when you go to him.
He's just always been that guy that you like having in your wide receiver room. And I thought what he said, I believe he said it on Monday during the press conference that they do before the Kentucky week and whatnot. And they were kind of talking about Kearis, he hasn't put up these huge numbers like many kind of expect him to, even what I kind of expect him to have this season, and how he's a senior. And yet he's not really seeing the production that maybe you would typically see from a guy like that. And he was like, man, screw the numbers. I don't care about putting numbers, like statistical numbers up on those walls. He said, all I care about is those right there. And he pointed over at SEC championships.
He said he's trying to put numbers on the wall. He's not trying to put numbers on a stat column.
And it was SEC championships. Never has won one in his career, and that's all he cares about. He said, I just want to win an SEC championship in my career. Obviously, he already has a natty. Would love to win another one.
He wants to win another natty. Yeah, but don't take that the wrong way.
I think that also just speaks to where this team's mindset is at. For a guy that has been at Georgia, this is his 5th year, correct?
Yes.
This is Kearis' 5th year. The fact that he's maybe this would have been a huge year for him to possibly up his draft stock, something like that, potentially elevate his career to where he could continue to play at the next level. And he's not even worried about it. He said, be damned with the stats. I just care about our team winning an SEC championship because those are the goals that we set in front of us as a team before the year. And that's what we want to do. And that's how we want to finish this year as SEC champs and in the playoffs. So I think that speaks a lot about the type of environment that Kirby Smart has instilled in that program.
Well, it all goes back to because they're not looking national championship. He's talking about he wants to win an SEC championship and stuff. But at the end of the day, too, they are really focused on this Kentucky game right now. Mm-hmm. When Kirby Smart was asked in his his post-game press conference about LSU, he goes, "Come on, guys, are you really think I'm going to answer that?" He literally he basically called the reporter stupid. I thought it was hilarious. I'm sitting here trying not to laugh. It was hilarious to me, and I'm going And he was he basically was I'm just trying to get on this plane and get back because I'm trying to prepare for Kentucky. Kentucky had a noon game at home, so they have he basically was they have a 6-hour head start on us right now because they had a noon game and at home. So I'm trying to get back and start studying for Kentucky. That's your head coach. And that runs over to your players where they're hey, they don't overlook teams. And they're very much ready to go for this next game, right? They are focused. Kirby, don't let it get by the wrong way. They're not going, hey, we already got a trip to Atlanta. This game theoretically could be a trap game for Georgia, being Kentucky on the road in Lexington, although they just lost to Vanderbilt, so they're not looking near as good. So that's also why it could be a trap game for you. You just clinched the East. You're going to Atlanta. You already know who your matchup is. This game, if you were to lose it, you're still going to Atlanta.
Dude, that'd be an over – if they finish the regular season undefeated, that'd be an overall record of 24-1 over the last 2 seasons. 24-1. That's insane. Back-to-back undefeated regular seasons posted for Kirby Smart.
Yeah.
5 division titles in 7 seasons. You're about to make your 3rd college football playoff appearance. You might have the chance to be the first team in college football playoff era to go back-to-back. Dude.
The team is on a historic type run right now, but once again, it comes game by game for Kirby. He is not letting his team when he sat there and talked about it the way he did, and he was mad. I kid you not, you could see it on his face. Go watch the interview. He was mad that they got a head start because they had a noon game at home, and they were having to travel back from a 7:00 game from Starkville. That's huge, man. That's his mindset. That's impressive.
Even the players, when the media was interviewing them and they were asking them questions, kind of are you guys going to go in there and celebrate a SEC, another division title? They're like, Nah, because that's not the goal that we set for this year. Like, obviously, yeah, you want to win your division, you want to go play the SEC championship. But like, we've set bigger goals than that. Like, that's not what that was not our
That
sole
is
purpose this season.
That is a byproduct of winning every game and being prepared for every. And that's what Kirby said too. He was like, "We're just focused on each week. The other stuff is nice, yeah. Like, I mean, I might talk about it for a second, but like, we're not going to focus on the fact that we're going to the SEC championship game right now. That's in 3 weeks. We have 2 games before then, before we can even think about LSU." And he was like, "So, but we're going to get those things. Yeah, that's nice. We've clinched the division. That's great. That's a byproduct of focusing on every single game." So like, they're so determined for this, right? Like, they are ready to go up there. And I know they're a 22.5-point favorite right now over Kentucky, which is insane. And whether or not they cover that, I don't know, because I personally, I wouldn't bet on Georgia on the spread this season, because I just, you don't really know what Kirby's going to do.
Mhm.
Like, you see
Especially
him
at this point, like, your main focus is win, stay healthy.
win,
Like,
stay
those are the
healthy,
2
get out of
things you
that
wanna
game.
do.
So if you're up by 15, do I think he's going to try to push to try to score another touchdown to cover the spread? Probably not.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I think he's going to try to just play. He's Brooks asked him about, like, basically, like, he called it the death marches, and I think Kirby liked it. You could tell he kind of liked it, but he was like, I mean, well, yeah, but we're just trying to focus on, like, moving the ball, and
Yeah.
he did the coach speak side of
Typical
it.
Kirby
But like,
answer.
Kirby has like that death march mentality. Like, he gets up in the third quarter. If you're up by multiple scores or something like that, he's like, all right, time to chew this clock.
I mean, it's-
let's have a 12-play, 70-yard drive that takes up 6 minutes of game clock and scores a touchdown. That's a death march, and that's exactly what that is.
That is asserting your will against
Yeah.
another team. Like, you're either going to tap out or we're going to tap out for you. Like, that's the type of mentality you have on those drives. It's like, you're either going to get gone or we're going to force you out the door ourselves, is what they're going to do on those types of drives. They did
Can't
it
do
against
anything about
Tennessee,
it.
and they did it against Mississippi State as well. And that's their MO, man. Like, if you're in the third quarter, you're down by 2 scores against Georgia.
Watch for a 12-play drive. It's coming.
It's probably
it's
wraps.
coming.
It's probably wraps, because they have figured that out on how to score on those types of drives. And even like if it's just a field goal, still they're going to chew up 8 minutes off the clock, and then all of a sudden it's like, light up, turn the lights on. It's fourth quarter already. Out of nowhere, it seems like that Georgia's chewed up half the game themselves. So, but I think people kind of get after Kirby for like all this coach speak, is what people call it. Like those comments about like, oh, we're not worried about the Eastern Division, blah blah blah.
You
like,
call it coach speak, but
it's well, that's what I'm saying is that, yeah, you can call it coach speak, but when your team believes in that, when they actually fully believe those things that they're saying, like, it's not just filler words. Like, I think a lot of coaches.
What do y'all
say.
want them to say? Like, and I'm not talking to y'all directly in the chat, because I think you guys, most of the people that watch regularly, are pretty thoughtful of this kind of thing. They're not going like, I just want him to sit here. Like, do people want him to come out here and just be like, no, we're going to kick crap at him. We're going to throw champagne everywhere because we got a division title.
Well, it's not even,
and we just won a national championship last year, but we're going to over celebrate a division title and look 3 weeks ahead to LSU. Like, as a Georgia fan or a media member, why would you want a coach to do that?
But it's not even that, because, like, every coach does it. Every coach gives, like, these blanket statements about, like, oh, we're just worried about this week. Like, we're not looking ahead. We're just focused on winning every single week. Kirby says you're a week away from humility. That's the type of mindset that Georgia
has. That's exactly what he said about Kentucky, too.
I think it's a big difference, the fact that Georgia actually believes those things. It's not just filler words. That they're like, it's not like just rehearsed. That we're like, obviously they're told to say those types of things, like you're expected to give these type of answers and stuff like that, but those players believe in that type of stuff. Like, we are solely focused on the job that is ahead of us, and that is Kentucky this week. That is Georgia Tech this week. They only ever look a week away. You're 0-0. You're 0-0 every single week, and so Georgia.
You're a week away from another game. You're a week away from humility. That's exactly what he said.
Why Georgia is so good and why they show up every single week and how they look so dominant every single week, because it almost seems like Georgia never gets caught in those trap games anymore. In years past they did with Kirby Smart, but as it's gone on, like these past couple of years, Georgia hasn't fallen victim to those.
No, and that's the thing, is this game could be looked at as a trap game because you just clinched everything. It doesn't really matter. If you were to lose it, yeah, it would hurt your playoff chances and stuff like that, because then you have to win in Atlanta. But at the end of the day, if you still win in Atlanta and you're a 12-1 SEC champion, you're in the playoffs at that point as a 3 seed or something like that. So at the end of the day, you would still be in, but it puts pressure on you down the road. So I don't think Georgia's going to fall to that, because I don't think Kirby lets them on it. And I think that speaking of Kentucky too, they have so much air let out of them at this point. Like this season,
Lost
this
to
is a
Vanderbilt,
team.
man.
This is a team that you and I, prior to the season started, talked about
Everybody.
them. Yeah, but I'm just gonna look it up. Yeah, everybody did, but like we even sat right here at this desk and we said, they could be a one-loss team, or maybe
10-2. It's right there on the paper.
We put them at 10-2 on the season. Actually, we did put them at 10-2, which means we did give them the Tennessee loss, I think, or I don't remember who we gave them. I don't know. It's not on there, I don't think, but either way, it doesn't matter. But we thought they could also be undefeated at this point of the season going up against Georgia. That was a real possibility for them. And now they're a 4-loss team. We're 10 weeks in. They are 6-4.
And they got that imposter first-round draft pick.
They lost to Vanderbilt last week.
Man, I tried to warn y'all about Will Levis. As soon as we found out that Joker drank mayonnaise with his coffee, I told y'all, I said, nobody that does that deserves to be a first-round pick. And he certainly has not lived up to the hype this year. Now, people are going to.
He's got like 2,000 yards passing this year.
Nah, I get it. A new offensive coordinator. You lost Wan'Dale Robinson, who was your big target on offense. That's a lot to go through in the offseason. So I think that has kind of hindered what he's been able to do this season. And he also got hurt. But at the same time, he just hasn't looked good. He's turning the ball over. He has not looked like someone I would be risking a first-round draft pick for.
No, I wouldn't either. He's currently, this season's got 2,012 passing yards, 16 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. Yeah. Just lost to Vanderbilt in a pretty rough-looking game.
Whole lot of mid right there, man.
It's pretty bad. As a team, though, they're way down on Georgia as far as like overall total offense, total defense, and everything. I mean, they only 339 yards of total offense, only scoring 23.3 points a game, and they give up 20 a game. I mean, that's Georgia scoring 17 more points than them on average, and also only allowing 9 less points than, like, theoretically this game could be a 30-point game. So that's why the spread's as high as it is, because, like, based on those, if it were to play out like that, it's a 30-point game coming for you. I mean, that's nuts.
I don't know how many points Kentucky's going to be putting on the scoreboard this week.
I really think that at this point they're so depleted. Like the air has really been let out of that entire program. Please. They're ready for the season to be over. Now the problem, like they expect to lose this game, but they can't possibly expect to win this game at this point. And I know, like, as a mentality, like Will Levis has to go in there thinking he can win the game, obviously. But deep down in the back of his mind, he's going, "There ain't no freaking way we have a chance to beat this Georgia team." Like he would never say it. They would never bring that up. And
that's probably how a lot of teams feel going up against Georgia.
Mean, yeah, it's probably true.
Okay,
but they have Georgia, and then they have Louisville. They might win Louisville, but Louisville could beat them at this point too. So they theoretically they could end at 6-6 if they were to lose to Louisville.
It'd be a pretty big letdown for Kentucky, I would say.
Making bowl
just based on where they were projected
at
the beginning of the season. But now let's go ahead and dive into some King of the Hill. It's not really going to be a King of the Hill, but more so just a general discussion. We're going to label it as King of the Hill. We're just
pull this back up then.
We're going to talk some playoff scenarios because it's going to get chaotic. And every single year this happens. Everybody thinks
this is worse than normal.
It is. I will say that. But, everybody thinks it's going to be clean cut. It's like you got your obvious 4 teams.
Not even close.
No.
Not even close this year.
You got a bunch of teams knocking on the door right now. You have one team pretty much that for sure is going to be in it, which is Georgia. That's the only team you could legitimately say like right now, yeah, they're going to be in the playoffs. That team's in. Ohio State, you don't know because if they Ohio State and Michigan both, because if one of those loses that game against one another at the end of the year, then a lot of people think that team's out. TCU, it's going to be based on if they win out, win the Big 12, are they going to be in? USC, now with Oregon losing, Oregon's out now with 2 losses. And now if USC can run the table and they win the Pac-12, are they going to sneak into the playoff? Does a 1-loss Tennessee, if they win out, do they get in the playoff? And now people are saying that Clemson has a chance to sneak back into the conversation because now with UNC playing at the level that they are, UNC and Clemson are going to match up more than likely in the ACC championship, I believe. And if Clemson's able to get a win over UNC, 1-loss Clemson, ACC champion, now they're back in the conversation. There's a lot that can happen. And so that's why I really want to center this conversation around is that I don't know who told Tennessee fans that they're the one team that will get in with the 1 loss. Like they are just the one team that, all right, yeah, if Crap is a fan, we're the automatic in. Like we're automatically the team that gets put in there. Don't be so sure of it because if a lot of these teams play out the way they will and they're conference champions with 1 loss, then I think the committee is going to give them the nod over a team that didn't even go to a conference championship, sat at home that weekend. I don't think you should be rewarded for that in the first place.
I don't think you should either. And it goes back to Bama shouldn't have been in 2017. They shouldn't have. They're the ones that set this standard right now, and that's why like Tennessee fans are looking back and going, "Well, it happened in 2017." Just because it happened back there doesn't mean it should have happened,
And
nor should
ultimately,
happen again.
It was the right decision because they
They
won
won.
the national
Right, like
championship.
I get it.
But
They were one of the
yes.
best teams, but like as far as the way that the playoff setup is and the way that they're supposed to weight things, they shouldn't have put that team in. And do I think they were one of the better teams? Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, they went on and they won. They beat Georgia. But this year, with that being said, right? Why is Tennessee better than an Ohio State or Michigan? That would be a one-loss team that did not make it to their conference championship.
Those two teams have been sitting at 2 and 3 pretty much the entire season, have not moved or budged.
They've been up there. Michigan had to climb a little bit.
They have consistently sat, for the most part, they're like.
Well, but like in the college football playoff, they've been up
sat there the whole time. So like obviously right now you see them better as Tennessee. And so you think a loss for Michigan to number 2, Ohio State, it has to be close, obviously. Like you can't get blown out, one or the other.
No, it can't be a blowout.
But if it's close, like right now you already see
game.
them. Right now you already see them better as Tennessee, which I know they're undefeated. Tennessee has 1 loss, whatever. But still, like who's to say that they don't get in over Tennessee? Like it's just a huge conversation.
Right now, like the way the playoffs look like they could shape out if everything kind of stays consistent would be Georgia as 1, number 2 being Ohio State or Michigan, one of those 2 teams. Then you're going to get TCU at 3. And then the number 4 at right now, it could be USC. I mean, USC could slip or Clemson. Or Clemson. Either USC or Clemson. If one of those teams went out and win their conference, they're going to be the 4 seed instead of they're not going, especially if it's Clemson. If Clemson wins out and is a 1-loss ACC champion, there is a 0% chance in my mind that they're going to put Tennessee in over them.
With Notre
An
Dame,
ACC champion?
Because that Notre Dame loss all of a sudden isn't even looking like
it's bad, but it's not as bad.
The brakes beat off of you, but I mean at the same time, Ohio State's using that as a signature win all of a sudden again because Notre Dame's climbing up the rankings. A lot of it has to do with because they beat Clemson, but I mean if
they beat North Carolina, didn't they?
Notre Dame,
yeah.
I don't know. I haven't been keeping up with Notre Dame that much, to be honest with you.
I think they beat North Carolina as well.
That might be North Carolina's 1 loss.
It is. I'm pretty sure.
So, but if Notre Dame keeps winning, they keep climbing up. All of a sudden, Clemson's like, okay, you lost to the number 13 team, we'll call them right now, but you still went on and won your conference, and you beat a pretty good UNC team, a Heisman finalist potentially, as well in the ACC championship game. Yeah, now you're getting Clemson back in there. So, like, Tennessee, I think, is what the heck is that on the comment section? Let's just go ahead and blur that out for you guys. We apologize about that. But I think Tennessee's a lot further out than they realize. Like, just because the committee has you sitting at 5 right now, I do not think that necessarily means that push comes to shove. Like, as soon as TCU loses, like, you're just automatically in that number 4 spot.
Yeah, I don't think that, I try to tell, after the Georgia game, I had some guys when I mentioned Tennessee fans, and I was like, I mean, they were like, well, you'll see us again in the playoffs. I was like, y'all ain't making the playoffs. Like, I don't see them making the playoffs. And they were like, well, haven't you looked across college football at the games right now? And it was like Clemson lost that night, Bama lost. I understand. That's fine. But it didn't, everyone's just immediately eliminating the Pac-12 and the ACC as a whole right now. It doesn't make sense to me. And you've still got, if TCU does not lose, that is the worst possible scenario for them. Because if TCU needs to be the one that loses, quite frankly, to give them a chance to get in. Because if USC wins out and Clemson wins out and TCU wins out, they have 2 teams that could go in at the 4 spot instead of them. 2 of them.
I mean, if you go and take a look at USC's schedule the rest of the way, they would have some big-time wins.
They got to play
in the season.
UCLA or something, I think.
And that's huge because we all know that recency bias is a real thing when it comes to the playoff committee. Because if you lose late, that looks a lot worse than if you lost in week 1 versus against someone else. Okay, you got it. You can pull it up for me.
See, this is the thing. They have 2 big games, actually. Yeah. If they win these out, they get UCLA and they get Notre Dame to end the year.
2 big games. You win both of those, and then you go on and win the Pac-12. Definitely going to be seeing them in the playoffs, I would say. Because, look, you can't tell me that this committee – this whole playoff thing that was built, that is centered around money, TV ratings. That's why they do a show every week for the rankings. It is just centered around money. You're going to sit here and tell me that they wouldn't want to put a USC team all the way from West
They
Coast.
They would 100% want a USC team.
You're
in this.
covering nationwide at that point because you're going to get a Big Ten team in there. So you're going to cover the North. You got Georgia, which covers pretty much the entire Southeast. And then you're going to sprinkle in some West Coast and then maybe even potentially TCU as well. Now you got your Midwest as well. Dude, yeah. So that's the biggest fear, honestly, for me, is that if Tennessee fans need to really hope that USC loses, because if they don't, USC's getting put in. You got Caleb Williams. Everybody loves Caleb Williams. And Lincoln Riley.
They love Lincoln Riley in the playoffs.
Yeah.
He was in Oklahoma. He was in the playoffs every year with Oklahoma.
Yeah, I mean, you could even start saying UNC could get in the
well,
conversation
and they could. That's a great point because we keep talking about Clemson, but the problem is Clemson has to play UNC in the ACC championship game. Whoever wins that game would at that point then be in the playoffs, in my head. And so it could be UNC. And Clemson hasn't looked incredible all season, so UNC could win that game. So think about that. You don't think that they would want a new face in to this in that aspect as well in the ACC? They've already got an SEC team in there. You don't think they would want to put an ACC team in there? They want more teams other than SEC teams.
There's a reason why undefeated Cincinnati was put in the playoff. Everybody knew that Cincinnati wasn't one of the 4 best teams last year. The committee knew that Cincinnati wasn't one of the 4 best teams.
But they had to put them in.
But you had to put them in, and it got some new names into the mix all of a sudden.
Everyone wanted parity across college football. You've got parity this year. Whether or not you like it and you want to say it's a down year in different ways, it's not necessarily a down year. That's the thing that I get on with this, right? Everyone wants to call it a down year. No, it's not a down year. It's a down year for Bama, and it's a down year for Clemson. It's not a down year for college football. You still got Ohio State. You got teams in the Pac-12 that are making waves and actually being good. You've got different teams in the ACC making a run for it right now. You have new teams that are good in general. That's good for college football. Just because Alabama and Clemson are having bad years, it is not a bad year for college football. And so that argument is so dumb to me. Like there is parity across college football in a way with just 4 teams, right? Getting in the playoff scenario, they wanted 12 teams to make more parity across. There's parity with 4 teams, and not just because teams are bad this year. Some teams are, but other teams are good, and you can't take that away from teams like that.
Yeah, and I'll close with this. And this is why controlling your own destiny is so important. So important. And that's why guys like Kirby Smart really harp on that, about we control our own destiny, and that's all that matters. Because when your fate is put in the hands of this college football playoff committee, you truly have no idea. Thank you, Dan.
We talked about that. We agree.
Yeah. You have no idea what this committee is going to do, because you don't know how other teams are going to because as soon as you do that, as soon as you get in Tennessee's position, and sure, you can feel as confident as you want that you are. And you know what? Tennessee probably is one of the top 4 teams in the nation at the end of it. You know, they probably are. But you don't want to put your fate in the hands of this playoff committee, because when you start running down the list, you have to at least honor teams that win their conference, because if they had to play an extra game that someone else didn't, in this case, they had to play an extra game that Tennessee did not. And you can't knock them for that. You can't knock a team for making their conference championship. And
it's a quality win too, for the most part, right? So, like for the ACC, you're beating another one-loss team.
You should not be rewarded for
top 10
sitting at home on conference championship weekend. You should not be rewarded for that. And Tennessee, So at the end of the day, what I'm saying is
Tennessee does not control their own destiny.
The worst nightmare is going into Selection Sunday, and you have no freaking clue. You don't know if you're a lock, because you have no idea what that committee is about to do with you.
No, you really don't. And do you want your fate being decided by like the 12 people across the board, or whoever, how many people it is, where they're going to sit there and look at all of this? Because and this isn't me just hating on Tennessee in a certain way, but if it was me and I was sitting there and I had a vote, I would put a TCU in. And you got especially this is considering they go undefeated, because if they lose their conference championship game, then at that point they're out, right? I would, if USC wins out, which means they have to beat UCLA, then they have to beat Notre Dame, they're in. And then they would have to win their Pac-12 championship game against a Oregon.
Right? Yeah.
I think it would be Oregon. I don't think it's decided yet, but I think it could be an Oregon team at that point.
Oregon or Washington, maybe?
Maybe.
Right?
I'd have to go back and see how their division's shaping out. But my point being, then they would win that game. That's a darn good resume at the end of it. Whether or not you want to say it's comparable to the teams that Tennessee had to play, it's a highly ranked team by the committee. It is a team that the committee has ranked in the top 15 probably at that point.
The last thing Tennessee wants is for Georgia to just go in there and boat race LSU, because that also just hurts that signature win, because Alabama loss all of a sudden doesn't look that great right now. And then if Georgia just goes in there and actually absolutely body slams LSU, then it's kind of like, okay, like, all right.
Which is possible. They're a 16-point favorite as of right now.
Yeah, so a lot at stake for Tennessee, and there's a lot of things that they need. There's a lot of dominoes that need to fall for them to really feel comfortable about getting into the playoff. And it very well could happen. These last 3 weeks are going to be absolute madness, and it's going to be interesting to see how the rankings shake out after championship weekend. But that is going to close it out for us, guys. We appreciate you guys for tuning in. If you are still with us, we really appreciate that for listening to all the content. If you are still here, go ahead and hit that like button if you haven't already. If you are not subscribed, go ahead and do that. You guys have been killing that for us. Subscriber count keeps climbing up, and we really appreciate that. It helps the channel grow. And it's good to see that you guys are enjoying the content as well. So that gives us a little confidence boost as well. But we got the socials drop below. You guys know the drill by now. Dr_J-Will, the Stodfather, and then the Classic City Pod as well. So if you need updates on like when we cancel a week or if we're going remote or something like that, that's where it's going to be done. It's going to be on Twitter on the Classic City Podcast page. So go ahead and do that to get all your alerts and whatnot. Big game for Georgia this week, of course. Again, you have a chance to finish out undefeated, but first you got to get through Kentucky. And with that said, Stoddard, you can close us out.
As always, keep it classy in the Classic City. We will catch you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Classic City Sports. Take a second to subscribe, rate, review, and share with your friends and family. Feel free to reach out to the Classic City Sports crew on Twitter with any topics you'd like discussed. You can reach out to Jeremiah at the Stodfather, to Jonathan at Dr_J-Will, and make sure to follow at Classic City Pod for show updates. Check back next week for a brand new episode. In the meantime,
two simple words which express the sentiments of the entire Bulldog